Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Saṅghaṃ Namasami. Okay, for the final readings for this week, I thought I'd wrap it up with some readings from Ajahn Chah, along the lines of kind of what we've been talking about, meditation, and in particular, more of the insight aspects of it, but can't separate them as separate calm and insight, but maybe emphasizing that a little bit more. And I don't have a lot of readings tonight, so it may be ending up a little bit shorter than usual, but we'll see where it goes. So I'm going to start with a section in the book Stillness Flowing, and it's in this chapter section called Calm and Insight. And I'm starting partway through this chapter in the section of Samatha and Vipassana. So starting on page 372 for people who are interested in going back and looking at it later. So he's talking a little bit before the reading section here starts about development of concentration, development of calm, samatha, and people developing very refined states of mind in focused concentration practice. Meditators who took refuge in refined states of mind and feared anything that might disturb the bliss of their samadhi tended to become trapped in doomed attempts to manipulate conditions in order to maintain them. By the way, this is Ajahn Jayasaro's text. We haven't gotten into Luang Por's quotes yet. The boldness required to look closely at forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tangible objects, and mental states would be lacking in them, and their defilements left untouched. In contrast, meditators, at peace after a training in which the calming and wisdom elements had been developed in tandem, would have no fear of sense contact as such, and could let go of attachment at the moment of contact with great fluency. They created no owner of their experience. Luang Por said at this stage the practice was fitting to be called vipassana, clear seeing of things in their true light. This is Ajahn Chah. These conventional expressions, samatha and vipassana, if you want to discuss them separately, you can. But if you want to talk about their relationship, then you have to say that they're inseparable, they're connected. A layperson once came and asked me if these days I was teaching people to practice samatha or vipassana. I said, I don't know, they're trained together. If you answer in terms of what actually happens in the mind, then you have to answer like that. Develop them simultaneously because they are synonymous. If you develop samadhi without wisdom, it won't last long. In one of his most celebrated discourses, Luang Por captured this idea with a simile. Wisdom is the movement of samadhi. It's like the phrase, still flowing water. The samatha and vipassana of someone who has developed right practice are in harmony and concord and flow like a single stream of water. In the mind of the practitioner, it's as if still water is flowing. The piece of samadhi incorporates wisdom. There is sila, samadhi, and panya together. Wherever you sit, it is still, and yet it flows. It is still flowing water. There is samadhi and panya, samatha and vipassana. The development of insight. On one occasion, Luang Por taught about the development of insight in terms of the two jhana factors of vitakka and vichara. He said that with the mind in a state of calm, a thought might arise, vitakka, prompting appreciation of it, vichara, resulting in rapture, which would then propel the mind into a deeper state of lucid calm. On the passing of that state, the appreciation would remain, or the vichara. If you maintain awareness, you'll get a report from the scene. It's similar to there being a person in a house with 6 windows. You stand outside watching the windows. From outside, you see someone appearing at one window, and then someone else at another, and you assume that there's 6 people in the house. In fact, it's all just the one person moving from window to window. That one person is named 3 characteristics. Everything is unstable. The 3 characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self are the object of vipassana. Penetrating them will cut off all doubts. As the practice of contemplating whatever phenomena arose in the calm, lucid mind as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self progressed, the meditator would experience a disjunction between the knowing and that which was known. It's not that you have to force this disjunction. Through the abandonment, the putting down of attachment, the mind and its object become automatically disjoined. At this stage, Luang Por said that the distinction between the mind and its present object was like that between water and oil. The separation allowed for a constant examination of phenomena. If you take your mind to this point, wherever you go, the mind will be analyzing. This is the enlightenment factor called investigation of Dhamma. It rolls along by itself, and you talk with yourself. You resolve and release the feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness that arise. Nothing can get close to the mind. It has its work to do. This happens naturally. It's not something you can contrive. He said that it was at this stage that the Buddha's teachings on the foundations of mindfulness become clear. When the membrane connecting the knowing from the known has been cut, then the meditator saw the body in the body, feelings in feelings, states of mind in states of mind, and unwholesome and wholesome dhammas in unwholesome and unwholesome dhammas. In other words, they were seen clearly for what they were, without superimposing upon them an independent, self-existent owner. Attainments. At a certain stage in meditation practice, the, quote, defilements of insight, which is vipassanupakilesa, may arise. Here, unenlightened meditators come to mistakenly believe that intensely positive mental states, such as illumination and bliss, are indications of enlightenment. And the list of 10 states, there's a footnote, first appears in the Patisambhagga? What is it? Yes, that. 2.100. It consists of illumination, knowledge, rapture, tranquility, bliss, resolution, exertion, assurance, equanimity, and decisiveness. You attach to the goodness that arises in your practice. You attach to the purity. You attach to the knowledge. This is called vipassanu, and this is Luang Por's own coinage intended for rhetorical purposes to form a pair with vipassana. Through the practice of meditation, defilements can be so effectively suppressed that they may seem to have been completely eradicated. As a result, meditators can develop an unshakable self-confidence in their perceptions. If their teacher refuses to accept the validity of their assumed enlightenment, they interpret it as either a sad misjudgment on the teacher's part or else as jealousy. Strong measures may be needed in such cases, and a short, sharp shock is usually the recommended cure. In the commentaries, there are stories of awakened monks disabusing others of their delusions by mentally projecting hologram-like moving images of elephants in rut or alluring women in front of them. Caught by surprise, the monk who had believed himself to have transcended lust and fear of death is suddenly made painfully aware that the defilements have only been driven underground and are still lying latent in his mind. Luang Por would tell the story of Luang Por Pao, who replied to a nun's declaration that she had become a stream enterer with a curt, a bit better than a dog. In Thailand, comparing a human being to a dog is considered extremely offensive. The shock and anger that arose in the Mei-chi when spoken to in this unexpected way immediately punctured her conceit. Luang Por once used the same method with a similar result when a Mei-chi at Wat Pa Pong mistakenly believed that she had attained a state of enlightenment. He listened silently to her claim and then, with his face a stern mask, said coldly, "Liar." It was one of the subjects on which Luang Por could be fierce. Don't ever allow yourself to get puffed up. Whatever you become, don't make anything of it. If you become a stream enterer, then leave it at that. If you become an arhat, then leave it at that. Live simply, keep performing beneficial deeds, and wherever you are, you'll be able to live a normal life. There's no need to go boasting to anybody that you've attained this or become that. Beyond the monkey. One sign that the practice was on the right path was the feeling of sober sadness that arose, the feeling of sober sadness that arose through constant contemplation of the three characteristics, which evolves into nibbita, or disenchantment. And this is Luang Por. An illumination takes place, and then disenchantment sets in. Disenchantment with this body and mind. Disenchantment with things that arise and pass away and are unstable. You feel it wherever you are. When the mind is disenchanted, its sole interest is in finding the way out of all those things. It sees the suffering inherent in the world, the suffering inherent in life. When the mind has entered this state, then wherever you sit, there's nothing but impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. There's nowhere to take hold of anything anymore. If you sit at the foot of a tree, you hear a discourse from the Buddha. If you go to a mountain, you hear a discourse from the Buddha. You see all trees as just one tree. You see all creatures as of one species. You see that nothing deviates from this truth, that all things come into existence, become established, begin to change, and then cease. Luang Por made clear that the disenchantment that he was referring to was not an expression of aversion, for that would have been simply another expression of craving. This disenchantment was the feeling that arose through seeing how mistaken it had been to consider impermanent phenomena as self or belonging to self. It was waking up from the enchantment of body and mind. This is not the monkey feeling disenchanted. It's feeling disenchanted with being a monkey. Luang Por maintained that meine, awareness of the present mental object as changeful, fluid, unreliable, of uncertain outcome, was the unerring guide right from the very beginning of meditation practice until its final conclusion. When mental objects were recognized as changeful, he said, it was like breaching the boat of a conceit below the waterline. The sense I am listed to one side and sunk. Luang Por taught that complete liberation of the mind was the result of creating a momentum where the tirelessly repeated inner contemplation of the three characteristics in a mind freed from the hindrances was complemented by a steady effort to be mindful and alert to the three characteristics in daily life. Eventually, the constant repetition and increased profundity of the contemplation reached a tipping point and bore fruit. Although Luang Por was reticent about talking in detail about the higher stages of practice, he did, on occasion, make some important observations. In one of his discourses, he described the case of the meditator who has, quote, a glimpse of nibbana, but is unable to fully integrate his understanding and has to return to the work of wisdom until the mind is fully mature. It's like someone who is in the middle of stepping across a stream with one foot on the near bank and the other on the far side. They know for sure that there are two sides to the stream, but are unable to cross over it completely, and so they step back. The understanding that there exist two sides to the stream is similar to that of the Gotrabhu Puggala, or the Gotrabhu Chitta. And then footnote, Gotrabhu means change of lineage, i.e. between the unenlightened and enlightened. The unenlightened and enlightened. It means that you know the way to go beyond the defilements, but are still unable to go there, and so you step back. Once you know for yourself that this state truly exists, this knowledge remains with you constantly as you continue to practice meditation and develop your parami. You are both certain of the goal and the most direct way to reach it. Right view has been established. The meditator knows the right and the wrong way of practice. They steer between the extremes of pleasure and pain and gradually move down the path of equanimity, but still make mistakes. They know that treading on thorns is painful, but they still can't always avoid doing so. But through constantly laying aside the tendency to attach to all that is pleasant and unpleasant in the world of experience, insight deepens until finally they become a knower of the worlds. When the mind is completely seen through personality view, all doubts and attachments to precepts and practices disappear. And now the mind of the practitioner is, quote, in the world but not of it. Luang Por made a comparison with the natural separation of oil and paint in a bottle. You are living in the world and follow the conventions of the world, but without attaching to them. When you have to go somewhere, you say you are going. When you are coming, you say you are coming. Whatever you are doing, you use the conventions and language of the world, but it's like the two liquids in the bottle. They are in the same bottle, but don't mix together. You live in the world, but at the same time you remain separate from it. Okay, now I'm just going to do a short talk from Luang Por Chah. And this is in the collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah. And this one is in volume 2, page 97. It's just a very brief reflection called Training This Mind. Training this mind. Actually, there's nothing much to this mind. It's simply radiant in and of itself. It's naturally peaceful. Why the mind doesn't feel peaceful right now is because it gets lost in its own moods. There's nothing to the mind itself. It simply abides in its natural state, that's all. That sometimes the mind feels peaceful and other times not peaceful is because it has been tricked by these moods. The untrained mind lacks wisdom. It's foolish. Moods come and trick it into feeling pleasure one minute and suffering the next. Happiness, then sadness. But the natural state of a person's mind isn't one of happiness or sadness. This experience of happiness and sadness is not the actual mind itself, but just these moods which have tricked it. The mind gets lost, carried away by these moods with no idea what's happening. And as a result, we experience pleasure and pain accordingly, because the mind has not been trained yet. It still isn't very clever. And we go on thinking that it's our mind which is suffering, or our mind which is happy, when actually it's just lost in its various moods. The point is that really this mind of ours is naturally peaceful. It's still It's still and calm, like a leaf that is not being blown about by the wind. But if the wind blows, then it flutters. It does that because of the wind. And so with the mind, it's because of these moods, getting caught up with thoughts. If the mind didn't get lost in these moods, it wouldn't flutter about. If it understood the nature of thoughts, it would just stay still. This is called the natural state of the mind. And why we have come to practice now is to see the mind in this original state. We think that the mind itself is actually pleasurable or painful or peaceful, but really the mind has not created any real pleasure or pain. These thoughts have come and tricked it, and it has got caught up in them. So we really have to come and train our minds in order to grow in wisdom, so that we understand the true nature of thoughts rather than just following them blindly. The mind is naturally peaceful. It's in order to understand just this much that we have come together to do this difficult practice of meditation. And then back to Stillness Flowing. The mind doesn't create things around sense contact. Once contact has occurred, you automatically let go. The mind discards the experience. This means that if you are attracted to something, you experience the attraction in the mind, but don't attach or hold on fast to it. If you have a reaction of aversion, there is simply the experience of aversion arising in the mind and nothing more. There isn't any sense of self arising that attaches and gives meaning and importance to the aversion. In other words, the mind knows how to let go. It knows how to set things aside. Why is it able to let go and put things down? Because the presence of insight means you can clearly see the harmful results that come from attaching to all those mental states. When you see forms, the mind remains undisturbed. When you hear sounds, it remains undisturbed. The mind neither takes a position for or against any sense objects experienced. This is the same for all sense contact, whether it be through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or mind. Whatever thoughts arise in the mind can't disturb you. You are able to let go. You may perceive something as desirable, but you don't attach to that perception or give it any special importance. It simply becomes a condition of mind to be observed without attachment. This is what the Buddha described as experiencing sense objects as just that much. The sense bases are still functioning and experiencing sense objects, but without the process of attachment stimulating movements to and fro in the mind. Having gained such clear and penetrating insight means it is sustained at all times. Whether you are sitting in meditation with your eyes closed, or even if you are doing something with your eyes open. Whatever situation you find yourself in, be it in formal meditation or not, the clarity of insight remains. When you have unwavering mindfulness of the mind within the mind, you don't forget yourself. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, the awareness within makes it impossible to lose mindfulness. It's a state of awareness that prevents you forgetting yourself. Mindfulness has become so strong that it is self-sustaining to the point where it becomes the natural state of the mind. These are the results of training and cultivating the mind, and it is here where you go beyond doubt. Luang Por said that realizing that the constant arising and passing away of all phenomena in accordance with causes and conditions is a fixed, invariable truth, is to find the only kind of permanence that exists. Realizing this truth of an unchanging changefulness is, he said, the end of the path that needs to be followed. In terms of the Four Noble Truths, the framework for all of Luang Par's practice and teaching, by bringing the 8 factors of the Noble Path to maturity, suffering is comprehended. And with the factors sustaining suffering abandoned, suffering ceases. Luang Por said, "It is as if an arrow has been pulled out of your heart." We'll leave it there for this evening's readings.
I'm wondering if you could speak about the role of talking to oneself in practice and suttas or occasions where a Buddha instructs monks to reflect, before you act, is my action going to lead to this kind of result? So on, things like that seem to occur in different forms throughout the suttas. And what you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's contemplation can take different forms, in my experience anyway, and sometimes contemplation can be very verbally active. You can be essentially talking to yourself or considering how to say something before you say it. How to say something skillfully in the realm of communication. Like in his advice to Rahula, before, during, and after, being aware of what it is that you're doing. And also, when it's more, along the lines of, say, contemplating Dhamma, that's the reason we have teachings and oral teachings and written teachings. These are words, and they're, not the truth in and of themselves, but they're guides to help us understand and examine our own experience and to apply, from that level, apply that into the level of experience to really bring it in to your own experience. So you can skillfully use words, Dhamma, the words of Dhamma, to actively contemplate. And then there's, times when it's appropriate to let that down and just experience, the effects, because the words are on a conceptual level, and that's one level. That's where we store a lot of information. But then you have to bring it out of that level and into a deeper level of experience. The experience of the characteristics that can be found in the heart, the affective experiences, where suffering is felt and where suffering ends on a very experiential level, below the level of concepts and words. So they're useful if they don't run amok, if they are taken charge of by, the crazy mind or greed, hatred, delusion, the underlying tendencies. If those defilements or obstructions take hold of the thinking process, that's when it becomes a runaway train. So you have to learn how to skillfully use thoughts for contemplation, and then how to put them down when you don't need them. My sense, anyway. Anything to add, Luang Por?
Not really. I mean, it's just as you said. I mean, it's. I mean, that's a fundamental part of practice, is learning how to apply the mind skillfully, and thought is a part of that. And so that certainly the one of the say enlightenment factors is Dhammavichaya, investigation of Dhamma. Vimamsa is one of the factors of spiritual success, which is kind of an investigation. There's, so those are very direct. These are thought processes that one has to learn how to apply skillfully. I think one of the things that, say, framing it in a, say, like a more maybe a modern idiom is like learning how to ask the right questions within the mind itself. Is a skill that we have to cultivate and develop. And one of the ways of, say, paying attention to see, is it useful or is it not useful, is because sometimes the application of like questioning or thought is its result, because if it starts to agitate and spin out the mind, then it's okay. This is not going in a good direction. But it can, if it's leading to more clarity and calm, then okay, this is beneficial. It's useful.
It reminds me of the, you did that half a day long last summer with that theme for the whole afternoon of thinking isn't the enemy.
Yes, I did that for Spirit Walk.
Yeah. It isn't the enemy unless it's the enemy.
unless it is, which it very well
doesn't
can.
have to be the enemy.
It very well can be. It's
something that has been coming up for me. I've been hearing other people talk about it too. And this morning I pretty much missed breakfast, and I was going on in my mind all these angry thoughts, and blaming this, blaming that, and it's like, oh, well, that's that thinking being used in a way that just perpetuates.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's, and as a general rule of thumb, yeah, we're slaves to our thinking. Just because it's so clear, so closely associated with me. It's sort of myself, what I think is right, what I think how things should be, or how they shouldn't be, and so we keep propping that up with our thinking, but that's the same misapplication of thought, and whereas skillful application of thought is that's where wisdom arises.
On that note, I'd be curious to hear if one knows they need to think about something, it's an important thing to think about, but every time they try to think about it, it upsets them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with that?
Well, I mean, it's just because you're upset at something doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. Like we can, again, how are we measuring it, and how are we holding it? Because then, if it's upsetting one, then we have to investigate why is it, what's going on underneath there. Where's the clinging? Where's the attachment? Where's the investment? And that's where asking the right questions is so important. In that sense of we start to use the thought process or the questioning process to try to sort of go underneath our immediate assumptions and our immediate reactive habits, and start to see things more clearly. And that's how, say, thought can help to unveil some of the assumptions and biases that we have.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's like, kind of investigating the different aspects of what it is that you're thinking about. Because, I mean, when I think about that, I think of, like, a good example is righteous indignation. If you have to think about something that's unfair, shouldn't be, it's not right, that kind of a thing, and then you start to really build up that sense of, anger or, indignation, I guess is the best word for it. Then, you sort of have to parse those two different angles out, and kind of realize that the indignation part of it is just causing suffering. That really is suffering. It's a reaction to a situation which may not be fair, it may not be right, or it may not be perfect. But yet the indignation that comes up is kind of an internal personal reaction that for the most part really won't lead to any kind of release or relief or happiness. It just kind of builds and compounds on itself. So you have to kind of learn how to willingly experience that and say, okay, well, this is what I feel. This is the truth of the matter, is it feels like this. It's really unpleasant or difficult. And, I can feel the heat rising inside of me. But then you realize that, if you allow yourself to fully experience that, then, without adding to the story by putting more words behind it, then you can kind of start to just realize that as an energetic kind of response inside. And the situation itself, may not change, or it may change, you don't know, but you separate the issue from the response and learn to realize that kind of response is just not going to get you anywhere. Yeah? And maybe it allows a little more space and breadth of awareness to hold the issue. And sometimes maybe a suitable answer or a suitable approach internally will come up from being able to hold that space a little bit more broadly.
Ajahn Karuṇadhammo, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the difference between the experience of nimitta and vibhava-tanha, because it seems like it's very easy to go from nimitta to vibhava-tanha on this, and just understanding correctly and how to avoid going from disenchantment to I don't want to be born again.
Well, I think one of the things is just in terms of concretely, as a term, as a Dhamma term, pointing to mental qualities, vibhava tanha is always going to lead to suffering and is intrinsically an akusala citta. It just is, because there is an investment of greed, hatred, delusion, there is an investment in self but the word nibbida, and problem is when it gets translated into English, then it has different connotations. So, but the word nibbida as a a Dhamma term, is a kusala citta. It is a wholesome state of mind that is for quite a while, Bhikkhu Bodhi was translating it as disgust, which, that's a very strong term.
Revulsion.
And then revulsion, which is another strong term. Disenchantment is a more neutral term. But nibbida, so it's a hard term to and it's the same in the Thai language. I think it's in human language. It's hard to not assume that because you're kind of disenchanted, that you're going to feel bad about it, because we love enchantment. But the on a Dhamma sense, what that disenchantment allows the mind to be very bright, because it has lost its and actually the word disgust is quite a good word, because say etymologically, the word disgust is also like from the root of gustatory, of flavor. So it's one's losing the flavor of the enchantment with the world outside and the world inside, so that there's a tremendous independence of heart that is established, and a brightness of heart, that the space is created because we're not caught up in the fascinations of our attraction and revulsion, or our liking and our disliking. One's seeing things clearly for what they are, and so there is a disenchantment. And it's in the sequence of there's a sequence of dhammas that are come up in the suttas many times, and then it starts with all sorts of really positive mental states of delight and tranquility and joy and happiness and then samadhi and really and then the out of the kind of, and where the Buddha actually sort of says, the happy mind is easily concentrated, and then from that experience of steadiness and stillness, composure of the mind, then one sees things clearly. Yatha Buddha jnana dasanam, knowledge and vision of the way things truly are. And it's from that there is an experience of dispassion and disenchantment. So and then that is a trigger for release. So it's not an intellectual analysis and getting fed up and bored with things. It is the heart full and not getting entangled with that which is going to stain it or complicate it. So that's different than Vibhavatanha.
Before I'm wondering, how would you approach or consider cultivating nibbida in a situation where an unskillful quality such as desire arises really strongly. It seems like disenchantment is pretty calming. It sounds like it's something that's calming.
Well, I mean, if you're thinking of cultivating disenchantment, you might want to pay attention to the beginning of the path, like sila and cultivation of wholesome qualities, of dana and relinquishment, and samadhi and mindfulness and reflection on Dhamma. It's that, the Buddha said, wow, if you get that disenchantment, then you're going to be released. I mean, no, it comes out of, it comes out of causal conditions.
And also just being willing to use all those foundations to look at the fact that you have something that you really want, extreme desire, and you don't want to feel that, just the pain of unfulfilled desire. You want to keep on having this over and over and over again, It's painful, not to get what you want. and it's that kind of clear seeing that would naturally result in disenchantment. You can't just force it.